It's the middle of January, it's 32 degrees, so a little bit warmer, not too windy, and I'm going to recreate our Christmas Eve drive and see if we didn't do all that stopping and the conditions were a little bit better, if we could make it all in one go. So I'm charged up to 100%, let's hit the road. Based on our last drive, it's saying we have 185 miles, 100%, 1116. The estimated range based off of ideal conditions is 284 miles, but let's see what we actually get. All right, good morning. We are on our way. So far our consumption is down to 327 and our drive is relatively close to the suggested path on our energy consumed graph. We are just about to downtown Minneapolis. The roads are relatively clear. I'm going closer to the speed limit. Speed limit's 55, I'm doing 60 and letting autopilot and navigate on autopilot do most of the work. So the original drive was 177 miles, I believe, and we had a lot of stops throughout the day. It was much colder, but this is a far more typical winter day. It's actually a little warm. It's 35 degrees outside now. For most of the country, I would assume they would call this a winter day. But in that video, I said in the summertime, we'd have no problem whatsoever doing this trip on one battery. So I'm going to try to do it here today in January to show that's the case, or maybe I'll be wrong. But we've got chargers along the route if we get into trouble, and I'll keep you posted as far as the different points of our trip, where our range is sitting, so you can get a good comparison. In my driveway, I couldn't tell that there is a decent amount of wind, but it is coming from the northeast, so a little bit of an unusual direction for us here, but I'll take a screenshot of the Windy app and show you how that's looking. But for now, we're just cruising on what will hopefully be a boring, uneventful drive, but interesting stats for you. All right, so almost about 44 minutes to get here. We consumed 15%. We're at 84.4, so it did a little better than expected, and everything looks good. We're going to continue on and go to the next leg of our trip. As projected, we have 220 miles of range. That's longer than our entire trip was last time, so we should be in the green. But let's continue. We'll make a quick pit stop in Bloomington. And before we leave, we'll check in on the comparison. We got here on Christmas Eve with 78%. Today we got here with 84%. Because we were here for hours on Christmas Eve, we left here with 74%. But obviously, as we're just turning around and going, we're staying at 84% for the drive today. So we got to my in-laws with 84% and are now headed to where we stopped for the supercharge, and that is the Target in Bloomington. So in navigation now, I've plugged Target in as the destination instead of the supercharger, so we don't start preconditioning. But we'll make a pit stop there to get the data and then continue on. But we're sticking pretty close to the speed limits. We're averaging 264 watt hours per mile, and so doing really well efficiency-wise. And the temperature is still at 34 degrees. It is 12:35. We're at 73%. Used about 11% to get here. Still doing good on efficiency, average of 250 watt hours per mile. Projecting the range still at 198 based on our current consumption. And here was that last drive. I was complaining about my driving style, but I was using autopilot and using the staying within the speed limit or close to it. So surprised about that, but still fine on energy. Next stop will be a pit stop in Burnsville like we did on Christmas Eve, and then we're heading south, and when we come back we'll be fighting the wind, so this should be interesting. I'll keep you posted. Quick check-in here. Arrived at the supercharger at 55% on Christmas Eve, 73% here today. Then you can see the red spikes as we charge up to 83% on Christmas Eve and stays the same here at 73% today. Alright, we made it home with 69% for this quick pit stop. Still 35 degrees out. Consumption has been 243, so pretty good. And on that last drive, we did better than assumed. So I'm going to take this opportunity to use the restroom quick, but then get right back on the road. As we saw, our home arrival today was 69%, 78% on Christmas Eve, or somewhere close to that. And then both times were just very brief stops, so we left with the same amount, 78 on Christmas Eve, 69 today. Right, so we are back on the road, and it's saying we're going to get past Le Sueur at 48% right now. That's the estimation. I think that's around what we arrived with after charging in Bloomington on Christmas Eve. So obviously a lot colder, different conditions. But if that holds true, then I think we're doing pretty good. I'm going to keep it close to the speed limit, so it's 55 here. I'm just going 58. And it's now 1 o'clock, so aside from that very brief bio break, we've been on the road for about an hour and 45 minutes and still haven't charged and still have plenty of range left. I'll catch you down near Ottawa. All right, we are out by my brother's place. It is 1:52. We're at 48%, so that stayed pretty consistent. There is the energy graph as we were driving. I guess here it's saying 47.7. And our consumption for that last stretch was 257. Let's make our last stop down here and then head home. Arrived here with 48%, so pretty similar to our Christmas Eve, but of course today we've had no charging. Here we're seeing pretty similar consumption because the car was warm from supercharging on Christmas Eve, so we used about 25% that day, and today we're using about 20%. Our stop here was relatively brief, so we didn't lose too much. We got there with 53% and left at 51% on Christmas Eve. Today we're holding at 48% and then going to do our next little jaunt into Le Sueur, which shouldn't use up too much. All right, we're now at 202 and at 45%, so didn't lose a whole lot, just a few miles from one stop to another. But this is our turnaround point where we'll be heading home from here. So you can see that last drive was a little inefficient, but it was 5 miles or something, so not a big deal. But now we'll head home, and we will be going against the wind at this point. And let's just check the Windy app again to see. We will be fighting a little bit of wind, but it's not terrible. We'll have plenty with 45% left to go. And let's head home. And here you can see a pretty equal minor drop as we get into town, and then as the car sat during our Christmas festivities, and then I started preconditioning way too early, we saw that huge drop on Christmas Eve, where the total drop was 48 when we arrived, down to 31% when we actually left. All right, and we are back home, and it is 2:56 p.m., so almost 3. We've got 21%, and it's 34 degrees, so pretty consistent temperatures through the whole drive. Saying we still have 49 miles. Our drive was not quite as efficient as it could have been, but pretty good. For our last 30 miles, we were back down to 297 watt-hours per mile. So without supercharging, this time we went 176 miles, so 1 mile shorter than what it took to do the Christmas Eve drive. Used 50 kilowatts and had an average energy consumption of 281 watt hours per mile. So much better in the temperatures, not stopping and letting it sit, chill the battery and everything. But it's still saying I have 21%. Since we left a little bit after 11:15 and it's now almost 3 o'clock, we've been on the road, essentially a mix of highway and city driving, for roughly 3 hours and 40 minutes and still have 21% left. I'm going to push a little further because I do have some time yet. So I'm going to run in, do another bio break while I'm home, and then we'll get back out on the road and see how far we can push it. All right, so we're just jumping on to Interstate 35. It's right near my house. And so we're going to head south for roughly 10% and then head back north and see how many miles that gives us. Now this is the most inefficient type of driving, although I am still, for the sake of this, sticking relatively close to the speed limit. So I'm not going to really be hyper-miling these last few percent. We did just get the blue snowflake, so it's saying, hey, be careful down here in the lower part of the battery. Nice that it gives warnings. So I'm not going to try to push this down to 0, but we might end up there. We do have the wind behind us right now, so we'll have that coming back. So probably turn around somewhere between 12 and 11% if there's a good turnaround, just to be safe. I can tell you, as we're getting closer to 4 full hours in the car, it was nice to get out and stretch a little bit. And so, there's a lot of talk of the inconvenience of supercharging. Most of our charges are about 20 minutes, and after 4 hours on the road, it's nice to get out for a little bit and stretch. So had this been a continuous journey of, let's say it's going to be like 4 hours and 20 minutes or 4 hours, 4.5 hours in better weather, I would definitely be ready to get out and do a little stretch. And if I hadn't yet, I would definitely be needing the bathroom. So EV travel is far less inconvenient than it's made out to be. Obviously, our Christmas Eve drive was a pretty extreme temperature and wind situation. Most people aren't facing that. Even here in January, it's warm for January here at 34 degrees. I think most places in the country would consider this winter, and we're still getting around with perfect ease. All right, we're now at 3:53. We were coming up the highway, doing really well, and then I navigated home and it said we were going to get home with 5%. I thought, well, we can do better than that. So I got off the highway a couple exits early and started just kind of going back and forth, weaving through city and stoplights, some main roads, which were like 50 mile an hour roads. Thought that would burn up a lot of energy. We do now have the dots on our acceleration side saying the battery is getting down there. We've had the blue snowflake on for the last several percentage whenever I set that turned on. So we are getting down there. We're over 200 miles, and now I am going to take it home. We're at 4% now, but we're also getting closer to that 4 hour, 40 minute mark of how long, this drive has been taking. So again, any normal human being would stop for a bio break before this point, and if you can incorporate supercharging into this, it's really not going to add much to your time. Would this be more efficient in the summer? Yeah, but 4 hours, 5 hours in the car at one stretch is plenty. We'll be home here and I'll give you the final stats. So back home with 4% at 3:57. 33 degrees. Our last 30 miles, our average has been 268 watt hours per mile. And I would bet this whole trip has been pretty efficient. So since last charge, when we left at 11:15 this morning, 211 miles, 59 kilowatt hours used, 282 watt hours per mile average, and I'm ready to be out of the car. So you can survive those really bad days and get ample range out of a normal day. Thanks for watching. If you found this interesting, you might like my winter survival video from last winter when I found out what it would be like to be stranded in your Tesla without any preparation on your way to work. So go check that one out, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks.